So, we are dealing with Andrew Johnson and Reconstruction efforts. Hello? It's fine. So we just got done with Civil War, right? So we leave off on Civil War. That's all done. That's all taken care of. So, North and South fighting with each other over a lot of things, states' rights, federal powers, and then there's the big one issue, slavery, right? We have all those states seceding, which obviously led to the war, and President Abraham Lincoln gets elected, accelerates things. He ends up winning the war for the North. Unfortunately, President Lincoln gets assassinated very shortly after the end of the war. So he wins his re-election campaign in '64, and now he's gone. So Lincoln had these big plans as to what Reconstruction would look like, what bringing the country back together is going to look like. And now he's gone. He's gone. So we have an entire nation of states that all hate each other, that just got done killing each other. And now what are we left with? The only person keeping it all together is dead. So where do we go? Where do we go? What's next, right? Well, Andrew Johnson's next. Andrew Johnson was next. Andrew Johnson was Lincoln's vice president.
Why did Lincoln pick Johnson as his VP?
So Lincoln picked Johnson as his vice president for a couple of reasons. First of all, Johnson was actually from the South. He was born in the Carolinas. He moved to Tennessee when he was a kid. He was a tailor in Tennessee, actually. Lincoln was a lawyer. Johnson was, just kind of a nobody who worked his way up. Similar to Lincoln, but they took different routes. This is random. Did you know Lincoln is a Hall of Fame wrestler? Yeah, Abraham Lincoln's in the Wrestling Hall of Fame. So he picks Andrew Johnson because they had similar roots when it came to how they came up in politics, but also the big one, Johnson is a Southerner, right? So Lincoln's going about his campaign, he's going about his presidency, and he's thinking, my goal here is to bring everyone back together. My goal is to bring everyone back together. So in order to do that, he wants to seem more sympathetic to the South. He wants the South to not see him as some sort of northern monster who wants to take all their slaves away. So he gets Johnson, So Johnson was a tailor in Tennessee, right there. He was selected by Lincoln because the South was sympathetic to him. During the war, he had kind of a weird role, right? He was established as the military governor of Tennessee. So part of the kind of tactic, right, of Lincoln was to kind of tackle important areas one at a time and kind of chokehold them. So then he would be able to take the state in its entirety. So for instance, in the southern Midwest kind of area, he wanted to take the Mississippi, which he did with the help of Ulysses S. Grant, take the Mississippi and then kind of spread outwards from there, right? And so when we kind of got a better hold over Tennessee, he sent down Johnson to be the military governor. So essentially keep the peace, prevent them from helping the South in the war again, right? So he establishes that, and the South kind of saw him as the representative in the government that would be more sympathetic to them, right? Yeah.
So why was he so sympathetic to the South?
So there's a couple of reasons. So first and foremost, we'll get there eventually, but it's kind of a similar vein to why police stopped enforcing the ban on alcohol in the 1920s. Because no cop is going to stay in their hometown, go around to a bunch of their friends and family and arrest them for drinking alcohol, right? Even if Johnson wasn't outright doing that, they saw him as the kind of guy who would restrain himself from forcing unfair or laws that they thought were unfair onto them, right? So Johnson would be a bit more sympathetic, but nicer about what he was trying to do than what they perceived Lincoln to be, right? And so they kind of saw him more favorably just because he was that guy in the Union government. He was almost like their representative in the Union government, right? And of course, after a president gets assassinated or a president leaves office for whatever reason, the vice president has to take over. So after Lincoln is gone, Johnson has to take over. So we've got a little bit of an activity we're going to do where we are going to go through some of the timeline of events, some of the things that Johnson did, because we'll get there, but he was a wildly unpopular president. So let's take a look at some of these things here. So, what does he do first, right? He becomes president. Within 3 days of him becoming president, he reframes the terms of the South's surrender to be less lenient towards the South. Already that's unpopular with the Southerners. The Southerners are trying to move forward, they're trying to join the Union again. Some of them are spiteful, some of them aren't, but outright he's saying to them, we're going to make it harder for you to join, He also then offers rewards for the arrest of leading Confederate figures. These two things alone make him wildly unpopular with the South. Lincoln wasn't popular with the South, but Lincoln was also the man that won the war. So the South said, okay, this is the man we lost to, we have to listen to him, we'll respect him, and also he was being not lenient, but nice towards the South. So now here comes Johnson, who's supposed to be the Southern guy, and Johnson automatically says, no, I want to make it harder for you to rejoin the Union, right? So, okay, so there's that. So then, after that, he grants amnesty to all white Southerners who are willing to take a loyalty oath to the North, which would allow them to regain their property if they took that oath, right? Why? Well, because they weren't really worried about the African Americans taking a loyalty oath to the North because the North was fighting for them. So, okay, we want to make good with the people that own the property. We want to make good with the powerful people in the South. Well, you have to get to the white people, right? Make them take a loyalty oath. Make them say, all right, I'm down with rejoining the North. And that'll be good. But then, of course, the North says, well, what makes them so special? Why do they just get to say, I'm sorry, I'm with you? And then they get to move on. So then we got outlines of Reconstruction plan for North Carolina, which is applied to more states. This includes appointing provisional governors to make new constitutions abolishing slavery, among other things. And that's constitutions within the state, right? That's not like a big federal constitution. That is an individual constitution that gives certain powers to certain states and takes away slavery so that it can't ever be done again, no matter what. And that also includes appointing provisional governors, right? So the next thing he does is accept states that do appoint new governors back into the Union, right? Now, the North kind of meddled with this. The North wanted governors in the South that would be sympathetic to the North's cause in the Civil War, the anti-slavery kind of people. So once again, doing bad things to the South, or bad things that would be perceived as bad to the South, right? Then, he allows Mississippi to place restrictions on the rights of newly freed African Americans, which were called freedmen. Now, you can see he did all of this stuff as basically a big screw you to the South. Well, then he realizes, wait, Lincoln wanted to be nice to the South. Lincoln wanted to welcome them back in with open arms. So then he says, all right, fine, you can just take away all black people's rights. He says, well, okay, fine, we'll keep slavery illegal. That was the whole point of this war for us. But you don't really have to give them many rights. That's fine. Which, of course, then makes him wildly unpopular with the North. So it kind of has this reverse effect where he has this terrible, terrible, terrible relationship with the North, or with the South, because of all the stuff he did previously, and now he does that, and now the North's like, dude, what are you doing? What are you doing? We go down a little bit more. He vetoes a bill calling for more protections for freedmen. This was kind of the North's way to try to clap back. So Congress goes to him and tells him they want to make this bill. And he says, that's cool, but like, I don't really want to. I just did this thing that's making me popular with the South. I don't want to go back that way. Well, it didn't make him popular with the South. All it did was make him unpopular with the North. He then goes to Congress and denounces radical Republicans calling for more protections for freedmen. So remember when we were talking about going into the Civil War, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party are not the Republican and Democratic Party of today. They're wildly different, and their main things talk about slavery and states' rights, right? So the Republican Party was big on federal kind of anti-slavery stuff. The Democratic Party was more individualistic, more states' rights, more pro-slavery, right? Because of how they developed. The North was more manufacturer heavy, the South was more farm heavy, and they needed the slaves on the South to make that financially responsible. So he goes to Congress and he says, those radical anti-slavery Republicans, they're idiots for calling for more protections for freedmen. Which of course then the South is just like, cool, we still don't like you because of all that stuff you did previously. And the North goes, dude, what the hell are you doing? Why'd you do that? Finally, after that, states start being ready to move to the Union, and then Johnson loses congressional support via the elections. Remember, I talked about how the South, Johnson, for all intents and purposes, was a Southern Democrat, right? So he's against the Republican mindset, but anti-slavery, right? At least in his stances. So then he goes on denouncing all these Republicans, and the Republicans say, you know what, fine, we're going to campaign really hard, we're going to show everyone how much of an idiot you are. So they go through and they end up winning more than 2/3 of the majority in Congress. Nowadays in Congress, we're lucky if one party gets a slightly over 50% advantage. Look at this past election. We just barely got over 50% with one party. It's so hard to get that. Back then, Johnson was so unpopular, but the opposing party to him got 2/3 of Congress, both houses in Congress, which is absurd. So what are we going to do with that? We've just talked about all of that. We just talked for forever. I don't want to talk for forever. So what are we going to do with all that? Well, we just went through. I want you to take out a piece of paper, and I want you to write down 10 questions to go along with all of those things we just discussed. I'll throw it back on the screen. And I want you to write as though you are writing like a list of questions to the president. And you can either take the view of a Southerner, you can take the view of a Northerner, you can do whatever you want. I want you to go and I want you to write down questions about these topics. Why were you more lenient towards the South, towards the beginning, right? Why were you less lenient towards the South? Why are you trying to arrest our figures when the war is over? Why are you straying away so far from what Lincoln wanted to do for Reconstruction? That kind of stuff. So I want you to take out a piece of paper. We're going to do that for the next 10 minutes or so with partners, and then we're going to talk about it. And then we are going to give an extension for homework tonight. I'm going to make a Google form. You're going to submit 5 of those questions, and we're going to review them in class tomorrow. Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay, cool.